Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Diablo and welcome to Explaining Factorio. Today I will be discussing the Logistic Train Network, which I will call LTN from now on. As always, there will be a timestamped index in the description so you can jump to any point that you are interested in. LTN is a mod for Factorio. I will therefore not be discussing any of the standard train mechanics that are native to Factorio in this video. If I happen to forget something or get something wrong, please leave a constructive comment down below so we may all learn from my mistakes. Let's get started, shall we? The basics. So what exactly is the LTN? Well, the mod description says the following. This mod adds a logistic train stop, acting as anchor points for building a fully automated train logistic network. But what does that mean? Well, in more basic terms, it lets you set up a train network that does all the heavy lifting in terms of train schedules and keeping stations supplied for you. This means that once set up, the system will start to keep track of the supply of a train station, and if it starts to run low, it will find the resources to fill it back up again. Not only by figuring out where the resources are, but also then creating and setting a schedule for an unused train. In many ways, the LTN system is much like a logistic network that exists for robots. An entity makes a request from the network, and another entity tries to fulfill that request by fetching items from a source that provides the requested item. So what does that look like? Well, let's start by having a look at a basic LTN system. At first, this might seem like a normal setup with a loading and unloading station, but upon closer inspection, you might start to notice some odd things in this setup compared to a normal setup. Like for instance, why are there colored lights at the train stations? And why are all the boxes connected by wire? And why is there a constant combinator at every single station? All these questions and more I will try to answer in this video. There are a few basic parts associated with the LTN system that you will need to understand in order to make this system work. These are the new LTN Train Stop, the depot station, the provider station, and the requester station. Also, you will need to know that the LTN system uses positive and negative values, respectively, for items we have and items we want. There are a few more advanced ways of working with this system, which, for the purposes of this video, I will not be going into, but this video should give you enough understanding to make a basic LTN system work, and from there start to expand upon that. Also, there are a few limitations to the system that you will need to be aware of. With the exception of the depot station, stations cannot have duplicate names. Trains cannot be longer than a combination of 31 locomotives and wagons. Well, okay, they can be longer, but the system can then not read the configuration anymore. Adding or removing locomotives and wagons from a train will set the train to manual. The train schedule is retained, so just set the train to automatic and it should be good again. The new LTN Train Stop. The new LTN Train Stop is the only entity this mod will add to the game and consists of three parts: the train stop, the output constant combinator, and the input light. The train stop works like any other train stop. You can give it a name, you can set it to read train content, and anything else you can do with a normal train stop. However, this one also happens to be linked to the LTN network and will therefore transmit its information into the network, whether it be the amount of stuff available or the amount of stuff requested. It all goes into the system. The output constant combinator gives us the ability to see what configuration the current train has, or in other words, how many locomotives, wagons, and fluid wagons there are and in what position. And in the case of a provider station, it also transmits the amount of items the train is there to pick up. We can use the train configuration information to limit the types of train configurations that can stop at this train station. We can use the pickup amount information to make sure we are loading the correct items or the correct amount of items, but more on that later. Technically, the output constant combinator also transmits the expected train inventory at the requester station after unloading. But since this is almost always going to be 0, because you are unloading the entire train, I'm going to ignore this for the purposes of this video. The input light has two main functions. First, it allows us to input information into the LTN network. For instance, to tell the system that this is a depot, provider, or requester station. Second, it provides us with information on the current state of the station. It does this by showing us different colors for different situations. Each color will also put a corresponding color signal onto the connected wire, and each signal will have a numeric value. Green means this station has a normal status. Blue means this station has an LTN-controlled train parked at the train stop. The previously mentioned numeric value equals the number of trains parked or waiting to park at this station. Yellow means this station is part of a scheduled delivery. The previously mentioned numeric value equals the number of trains that have this station as part of their schedule. White means this station has not yet been initialized. Red either means this station has a short circuit or is a deactivated stop. The previously mentioned numeric value determines which it is, where a 1 equals a short circuit and a 2 equals a deactivated stop. Pink or purple means this station has a duplicate station name. Remember, only depots can use duplicate names. The depot station. The depot is the most basic of the three station types in the LTN system. It is, for all intents and purposes, a way to park a train that is currently not being used. The LTN system will use these parked trains to determine if any of them are usable to fulfill an outstanding request. This depends on the configuration of the train and the type of request made. Only trains parked at the depot station can be used by the LTN system to set a new schedule and fulfill a request. Once set, the train will first have to complete the schedule before it can be used again. Trains that arrive or arrive back at the depot will have their current schedule automatically removed. So in order to have a new train available for the LTN network, all you have to do is place the train on the track and send it to a depot station. The LTN system will then take care of the rest. Here you can see a basic depot station. All that is needed for a depot station is a constant combinator inputting a depot station signal into the input light, telling the LTN system that this is indeed a depot station. A common practice is to name your depot stations depot or LTN-depot in order to keep track of all the stations you will be getting in your stations overview list. The provider station. The provider station is needed to be able to fulfill requests made by requester stations. It is relatively simple to set up a basic provider station, but for a more controlled environment, things can get complicated fast. Here you can see a very basic provider station. All that is needed for a basic provider station is to input a positive number of amount of items available at the current station into the input light. For instance, by connecting the boxes at the station to the input light. I will show you a more normal type of setup later. The requester station. The requester station is used to keep a station provided with the resources it needs. Here too, a simple setup is relatively easy, although it requires a little more thought than a provider station, and this too can get complicated fast. Here you can see a very basic requester station. Again, I will show you a more normal type of setup later on. All that is needed for a basic requested station is to input a negative number of the amount of items needed at the current station into the input light. For instance, by connecting a constant combinator with a constant negative signal of the resources we want to have and inputting that into the input light. Setting up an LTN system. So now that we know what the basic parts of the system are, let's go through all the steps needed to set up a complete LTN system. In this setup, we will build a depot, a provider station for iron plates, and a provider station for raw oil, a requester station for iron plates, and a requester station for raw oil. I hope to demonstrate the different aspects of this system and give you the tools needed to start working with it yourself, or, if you already are, give you a quick refresher if you are looking for it. For the purposes of this demonstration, I have turned off the LTN notifications as they are not important during setup. I will go into more detail about the options menu and any unexplained signals later. The depot. First, we will need to create a depot from which the LTN system can select the trains it needs to fulfill a request. I will be making 2 stations for this particular train depot, but you can make it as big as you want to. Once we have our 2 stations placed, we must tell the LTN system that they are in fact depot stations. I find that the easiest way to do this is by connecting all the input lights together by a wire and having one constant combinator with a depot signal on the same wire. This will input the depot signal into all connected stations at the same time. Please note that this will mess up the visual look of the lights, aka it might show the wrong color, but it will function correctly. Optionally, I would highly recommend that you rename all your depot stations to a singular name, something like LTN-depot for instance. This will make it easier to find in the train station overview list. Remember, only the depot stations can have a duplicate name. This means you will have lots and lots of station names in the station overview list once your factory starts growing a bit. And that's it. We have a working depot. The provider station for solids. For our first provider station, I will again lay some track and place an LTN station. Then we make sure that we can actually load something here. Now that we have a loading station, it is time to tell the LTN system that it's there. As we have already seen a simple version of this, I will now show you how to make a more normal or standard setup for this type of station. I will start by connecting the boxes to each other with a wire. Once this is done, I will put a power pole down and connect the wire to that. This is a completely optional step, but one I like to include so I can easily see how much resources are in the boxes. Then I will connect the wire to the input light. Now, whenever there is any amount of resources in these boxes, the LTN system will know about it and will be able to act upon that. However, since I do not wish my trains to run for every scrap of iron ore that happens to find its way into a box, I will need to tell the LTN system to wait until there is a sufficient amount that makes the run worthwhile. Let's say a full train, for instance. This allows slower or smaller mines to fill up a train's worth of stuff before it will actually allow a train to load there. This way, the loading times are always short, and trains will divert to other loading stations if this one is not yet ready. Well, how do we do that? Well, by placing a constant combinator and setting up the correct signal for this station. Since I'm running trains with 1 locomotive and 2 wagons, I will want to tell the LTN system that it can only use this station as a provider station once it actually has a full load of 4,000 iron plates in its stores. We can do this by using the provider threshold signal and setting that to 4,000. We then connect the constant combinator to the input light, and the LTN system now knows that this station has a minimum pickup requirement. As the symbol implies, whenever an amount of items in the boxes is equal to or bigger than 4,000, they are available to the system. Anything below that will be ignored. Of course, make sure you load balance your boxes to keep everything divided equally. We have now set up a successful provider station. The provider station for fluids. For this provider station, I have already laid the track, placed the station in the correct position, and placed the pumps and tanks down and made sure they are connected by wire so we can read the content of the tanks. Now we could connect the tanks to the input light so the LTN system also knows the content of the tanks. However, again, since I do not wish my trains to run for every drop of raw oil that happens to find its way into a tank, here I will also need to tell the LTN system to wait with the pickup until we have a full train's worth of fluids. We can do this the same way we did before. We place a constant combinator and set the provider threshold for this station. Because I'm still using the same train configuration, 1 locomotive and 2 fluid wagons, I will set the provider threshold to 50,000, as each fluid wagon can hold up to 25,000 units. And that's it. We successfully set up a provider station for fluids. The requester station solids. Now that we have our provider stations, we can start requesting those provided resources. As you can see, I have already laid down some tracks, put the station in its correct position, and placed the boxes and inserters accordingly. It is important to know that the LTN system uses positive numbers to indicate what we have and negative numbers to indicate what we want. Now we need to tell the LTN system we would like to receive some resources. But how do we do that? If we connect the boxes to the input light, it will give us a positive number if there is anything in them, or at the very least a 0 if the boxes are empty. But as we know, we need a negative number to indicate we want to have X amount of stuff delivered. Of course, the easiest way of getting a negative number into the LTN system is by using a constant combinator and setting a negative number on a resource we would like to have. Now, I would of course like my boxes to be kept nice and full, so I will do a quick count and see that there are a total of 12 boxes at my unloading station. So that means 12 times 4800 equals 57,600 items that we will need to request. Looking at our combinator, we select iron plates and set them to negative 57,600. And now, if we were to connect it to the station, the LTN system knows to deliver that amount to this station. But hold on, what happens if I already have some iron plates in my boxes? Well, at the moment, we've only told the LTN system to bring us a set amount. Always. Forever. So, even if our boxes are completely full, the LTN system will still try to deliver 57,600 items to this station. That doesn't sound too practical. Is there a way to automatically request less if the boxes get filled more and more? Or how about stopping the requests altogether if the boxes are completely full already? Rest assured, there is. As we know, the boxes are capable of telling us their content. This is because we can connect all the boxes with the same wire, and the content of these boxes will be added up on that wire to give us a total amount. If we then get that positive amount on the same wire as the negative amount we are outputting from the constant combinator, we should get an amount of iron plates signal that is negative 57,600 plus the amount already in the boxes, therefore decreasing the amount of items being requested. To show you this, I will take 4,000 iron plates and divide them among the boxes at the station. As you can see, the number of requested items has decreased by 4,000. As soon as the boxes have filled up, the requested number will have decreased to 0, effectively stopping this station from requesting more items. However, the second a single iron plate is removed from the boxes, we will have a negative number again, which the system will then try to fulfill. As I don't want my trains to immediately start jumping into action to provide only a few iron plates, I will want to put a request threshold on my station. This will make sure the station will only make new requests of the LTN system once it has reached a certain amount of missing items. We can set this request threshold in the constant combinator that is connected to the input light. I would suggest setting this to a full train's worth of items so we use our train's fuel as efficiently as possible. Of course, make sure you unload your boxes evenly. This will prevent the train from showing up with items for all the boxes when in fact only one or two of them are emptying out, thus leaving your train idling at the station when it could be doing something more productive. This also could cause other more complex issues, which I will go into later in the video when I talk about the options menu. There you go. We now have a fully functioning requester station. The requester station for fluids. As with the requester station we did earlier, the requester station for fluids works in practically the same way. I have set up a station, connected the tanks containing our product, in this case raw oil, and set up a constant combinator with a negative amount of fluids that we want to have, and a request threshold with an amount at which we want our stations to start requesting. The negative amount set in the constant combinator and the positive amount coming from the tanks will give us an amount of missing units. Again, this, together with our requester threshold, will ensure that the station will not request anything as long as it is not needed. Or, in other words, as long as the amount of missing fluid units does not exceed the request threshold, the station will not create a request from the LTN system. And that's it for the requester station for fluids. And there you have it. We've set up a fully functional LTN system, complete with provider thresholds, requester thresholds, and stations that keep track of how many items there are. There are, however, a few more things to talk about. Other optional signals. As you might have noticed, I have not yet used or mentioned all of the available signals we can set. Here is a quick overview of those signals and what they might be used for. The Encoded Network ID is used to separate different LTN systems from each other. If you, for instance, have an outpost that is really far away, you might not want the train from your main base going all the way out to deliver iron ore from an iron ore mine there to a smelting area that is right beside it. Or even worse, from an iron ore mine in one outpost to a smelting area in another far-off outpost. Travel times could get out of hand fast. In this case, you might want to give both outposts a separate ID, so they will only use trains from within their own network, which would presumably be in the same area. Or, as another example, you might want to ensure that your copper mine is always guaranteed to have an available train waiting to pick up the mined ore. In this case, you could separate out the copper mine, the unloading station, and one or two depot stations, so those trains will only run on the separated copper line from mine to unloading station. Stations can exist in multiple network IDs at once. So, for instance, in our first example, you mine ore in an outpost. You use a separated LTN system to move the ore from the mine to a smelting area and then have the plates go to a loading station that has a few different IDs associated with it of other close by areas. Those other areas can then use the plates for their production, but other further away production areas cannot collect these plates. Minimum train length allows you to set the minimum length of your locomotives and wagons allowed at this station, therefore preventing shorter trains from accessing this station and possibly messing up your sorting for that area. Maximum train length allows you to set up a maximum length of locomotives and wagons allowed at this station, therefore preventing longer trains from accessing this station and possibly blocking tracks behind it. Limit trains allows you to set a limit for the amount of trains this station is able to receive. This could, for example, be useful in situations where you do not have a lot of room for a large stacker and want to prevent any blockage that can occur if a lot of trains were to try to get to the station all at once. Provide stack threshold allows you to set a threshold based on the amount of stacks you want to have picked up. This is in contrast to the normal threshold that looks at a certain amount of items, meaning you can use this at stations that have mixed items in the boxes, items that have different stack sizes, for instance, fuel and iron plates. As fuel stacks only 10 items, setting a normal threshold for 8,000 items would work for the iron plates, what would prevent the fuel from ever being picked up. Provider priority lets you set a priority for a provider station. A higher priority means the station will be used first. Locked slots per wagon lets you limit the amount of wagon slots that can be used by a provider station. If you want to make sure that a train is able to pick up multiple items in the same wagon, then this ensures a station cannot load more than a set number of slots. Request stack threshold allows you to set a threshold based on the amount of stacks you want to have delivered. As with the provide stack threshold, this is useful at stations with items of different stack sizes. Request priority lets you set a priority for a requester station. A higher priority means this station will be supplied first. Disable warnings allows you to turn off the warnings a requester station might give when, for example, not being supplied. The disabling of these warnings count for this station only. A global disabling of warnings can be done from the options menu, which I will talk about later. Encoded positions of locomotives, wagons, fluid wagons, and artillery wagons allows you to specify what order the train that can use this station has to be in. This can be useful if you use mixed trains in different configurations. I'll try to give a brief explanation on how this works. As was mentioned earlier, the output constant combinator at an LTN station shows you the configuration for the currently parked train. The easiest way to ensure this is the only type of configuration that can stop at this station is to just copy down exactly what it shows you and input those numbers into the corresponding signals in the constant combinator that is inputting a signal into the input light. However, if you would like to know what those numbers mean, I will explain. Every position of the train, starting from the front, as seen from the train station, gets assigned a number. This number can then be used to determine what entity goes where. Let me show you. The first position gets number 1. Every position after that gets double the amount of the previous number. So 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, and so on and so on. Now let's say I have a standard 1-4 train, meaning 1 locomotive plus 4 wagons. When I want to make sure only this type of configuration can stop at my train stop, I will have to encode this into the LTN system by using signals set up in the constant combinator that is inputting into the input light. The first position is a locomotive, so this would be encoded as a 1. We would add a encoded positions of locomotives signal with a value of 1. The next 4 positions are wagons. To encode these, we add up the next 4 numbers. In this case, 2 plus 4 plus 8 plus 16, which equals 30. And we would add an encoded positions of wagons signal with a value of 30. Now this specific configuration of train will be used by the LTN system to start a new delivery request. Other stuff. This is where I will mention a few things I think might be nice to know but are not necessarily needed to set up a working system. 1. What is set in the train schedules? When the LTN system creates a train schedule, it sets a couple of things besides just the pickup and drop-off parameters. If we look at a newly created schedule, we can see that besides the depot station, the LTN system has automatically added the loading and unloading stations with 3 parameters each. At both stations in the schedule, we see the mandatory pick up X amount of a certain item or drop off until X amount is reached, usually 0. This amount will depend on multiple factors like how much was requested or how much is provided, as well as others. But besides this, we can also see 2 other parameters set. The first is an AND parameter, and it states that besides the aforementioned mandatory pickup drop-off amount, the train must also have 2 seconds of inactivity. The point of this is to allow inserters to finish so they don't get stuck if they need to insert something else for another train later. The second extra parameter is an OR parameter. This says that no matter what happens, it will move on to the next step after 120 seconds. This is presumably meant to prevent trains from getting stuck at very slow stations. However, I have found this particular setting to cause more issues than it seeks to solve, and do not use it myself. The extra parameters can be changed in the options menu, which I will go over later. 2. Loading the right stuff. As an optional step to make sure train stops do not load the wrong items into a train, we can add a little security to our station by making sure that if we have mixed our resources in our boxes, either by accident or on purpose, we only load what we are there to actually load and nothing else. We can do this by changing the stack inserters that load the train to stack filter inserters, connecting them all by wire of a different color than was used for the boxes, setting them to set filter, and then connecting the output constant combinator of the train stop to the same wire. Remember, when a train is at a provider station, it outputs what it is there to pick up through the output constant combinator. That signal will then be used by the stack filter inserters to set their filter. Thus, only that item can be loaded onto the train. This will ensure that when a train stops to pick up iron ore, it does not accidentally pick up any stray resources in any of the boxes. Of course, if you have a mixed mine, this could be used to pick up either one or the other of the mixed mine resources. Just remember to set your provider threshold to the correct value if needed. The more different resources you have, the less space a resource can potentially occupy in the available storage space. The same thing can be done at a requester or unloading station. However, because, as mentioned earlier, the parameter at the unloading station will most likely be 0 for the product you are unloading, you cannot simply connect the stack filter inserters to the output constant combinator and assume this will work, because an item value of 0 does not set a filter. So to ensure a safe unloading station, we will instead connect the train stop to the input of an arithmetic combinator with a wire not used for the boxes. We also connect the wire used for the request, the negative amount from the constant combinator plus the positive amount from the boxes, to the same input with the wire color used there. We then set the arithmetic combinator with the following equation: each times -1 output each. What this will do is take the positive amount of items in a train and turn that into a negative amount, but also take the negative amount from the request wire and turn it into a positive amount. The difference will be a positive amount of items of what we want to unload at this station. Any other items in the train will just produce a negative amount and therefore not set the filters and therefore not unload. Now just connect the stack filter inserters to the output of the arithmetic combinator and you are done. A second benefit from doing this is that the amount of items is immediately subtracted from the total amount available. Thus, if the train gets stuck at this station for whatever reason before it could completely unload, the LTN system will not request a new train as the request amount has already dipped below its request threshold. 3. Loading the right amount. Now that we have our inserters set up with a filter condition, we can use this to also limit the amount of items that are loaded. If, for instance, you have a train that needs to load multiple resources into the same wagon, if the first item at the first loading station fills your wagon, none of the other items would get loaded. While you can request very specific amounts, the standard schedule tells the train to pick up that amount and have 2 seconds of inactivity. But as long as the inserters are loading the train, even though it's past the amount requested, the train has not yet seen the 2 seconds of inactivity, meaning it will load until the inserters stop inserting. But by that time, your wagon is fully loaded. To prevent the inserters from overloading your wagon, you will need to make sure the inserters stop inserting when the requested amount has been reached. To do this, we will connect the train stop to an arithmetic combinator. We will set this arithmetic combinator with the following equation. Each times -1 output each. What this will do is turn the amount of stuff in the train to a negative number. This negative number now represents what we have already loaded into the train. If we compare that to the amount of items the train is there to pick up, we get an amount of items that is remaining to be picked up. We can easily do this by connecting the output constant combinator of the train stop to the output of the arithmetic combinator. Now we have combined the positive pickup number with the negative train content number. Note that all comparable signal values on the same wire get added together. So the more you load into the train, the smaller the value of the signal becomes. Let's say the train is there to pick up 2,000 iron plates, and you've already loaded 500. Since we turned that positive 500 value into a negative 500 value, we now have a value of 2,000 minus 500 left to pick up, leaving a value of 1,500 on the wire. If we then connect the wire to the stack filter inserters, they will have their filter set to the signal on the wire, in this case iron plates. As soon as the number reaches 0, the filter will be removed from the stack filter inserters, instantly stopping them from working, thus creating 2 seconds of inactivity and sending the train on its way. The Options menu. The Options menu has a few things of note in it that I think you should be aware of. Please note that all of the options have a short description if you hover over them. Let's have a look at it and go through the items that are in there. Dispatcher enabled. Turning this off will stop trains from being dispatched to a request. In other words, no new schedules will be set for trains in the depot. All other LTN functions will keep working. Limit stops checked per tick. This will limit the amount of train stops being checked per tick for new delivery requests. Message level. This will set the amount of messages the LTN system will produce, from nothing all the way up to every little thing is put on the screen. You might want to leave this on default at the start, but I would suggest going to errors and warnings only, or even completely off after a while. It can get very annoying to have so much information constantly popping up with the sound effect that goes along with a new Lua message. Also, maybe turn it off during setup, as it will give you a prompt about everything you are still trying to set up. Message filter timeout. Ticks. How long will a message stay on the screen? Enable debug logs. Just leave this off unless you run into serious issues with the mod itself. Request threshold and provide threshold. If you use the same train config for every station and every station is exactly the same, you can use this to forego the threshold signals that you would normally put into a constant combinator at every train stop. This will set a global threshold for all stations. Please remember that fluids usually use much larger numbers, so those would still have to be set via a local threshold signal. Schedule circuit conditions. Unless you are really familiar with the LTN system and are going to be integrating circuit networks into your setup, I would leave this off. This would add certain circuit conditions to all train stops in the train schedule. If not set up properly, it could leave your trains stuck at a station. Depot inactivity. Ticks. This will set the amount of time a train will have to wait at a depot, according to its schedule, before it can be used again. Stop timeout. Ticks. This will set the amount of time a train can idle at a station before it is forced out. I recommend setting this to 0. This will remove the condition from the schedule and leave the trains in the station indefinitely. If, for whatever reason, your train is unable to unload its stuff, you do not want the train going around picking up other items and then messing up other train stations because you now have a mixed train running around. Delivery timeout. Ticks. This will set the amount of time a train can take making a delivery. If a train has not made a delivery within this time period, the train will be considered lost and a new train will be dispatched. The train that was late will still complete its run if able. Delivery completes at requester. Normally, a train will lose its schedule at the depot station. However, turning this option on will change that behavior to the requester station. If you are unsure, leave this off. Finish loading. This will ensure the inserters are empty before a train will leave. Turning this off could make inserters get stuck with items in their hands, but will have trains leave the station a little faster. Depots reset filters. This setting will make sure all customized setups of a wagon will be erased as soon as it arrives at a depot station. This way you can safely send any train you no longer need to a depot station without having to reset it yourself. And that's it. That's all the options there are. Summary. So in summary, the LTN system requires 3 basic things to work: a depot, a provider station, and a requester station. An LTN system is made up of 3 separate entities: a train stop, an output constant combinator, and an input light. Positive numbers represent what a station has or can provide. Negative numbers represent what a station needs or requests. As a last remark, I would like to thank Optera, the mod maker, for creating this mod. Go and check him out on the Factorio mod site or in-game in the mods section. He has a whole bunch of interesting mods. All that is left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope this video has been of help to you. Consider supporting me through Patreon so I can make more of these in the future. Leave a like if you did, subscribe to the channel, comment down below if you have any suggestions or ideas. My name is Diablo and I will see you next time.